Admiral Yuna Chen had seen many strange things in her 40 years of service. She had watched humanity take its first steps beyond Earth. She had stood on the bridge when the first colony ship reached Alpha Centauri. She had shaken hands with beings from other worlds and learned that humans were not alone in the universe. But nothing had prepared her for this moment. The holographic screen in front of her showed a message. It was written in the universal trade language that all spacefaring species used. The words were simple, but their meaning was impossible to believe. The Galactic Concord, representing 4,712 spacefaring species, hereby declares a state of war against the species known as humanity. Yuna read it again, then a third time. The words did not change. Her first officer, Commander James Okonkwo, stood beside her. His dark face had gone pale. "Admiral, this has to be a mistake. We have no enemies. We barely have any contact with most of these species. It is not a mistake," said a soft voice from the communications station. Lieutenant Sarah Kim was young, barely 25, but she was the best translator in the fleet. Her fingers moved across her console as more data came in. "I am receiving confirmations from every sector. Every species in the Concord voted in favor. It was unanimous." Yuna felt her heart grow cold. Humanity had achieved faster than light travel only 32 years ago. They were newcomers to the galactic stage. They had 3 small colony worlds and a fleet of 12 military vessels, 12 ships against a galaxy of thousands of species, each with their own fleets. "How many ships are coming?" she asked. Lieutenant Kim checked her readings. Her hands began to shake. "Admiral, I am detecting over 10,000 vessels entering our solar system. They are coming from every direction." Yuna closed her eyes. 10,000 warships. Her fleet had 12 destroyers. This was not a war. This was an execution, but Admiral Yuna Chen had not risen to her position by giving up. She opened her eyes and looked at her crew. They were scared. She could see it in their faces. But they were also looking to her for guidance. "All ships, form defensive positions around Earth," she ordered. "We will not fire first, but we will not surrender without a fight." The fleet moved into formation. 12 small ships arranged themselves between Earth and the approaching armada. It was like mice standing against a tsunami. But they stood anyway. Minutes passed, then hours. The alien fleets arrived and took positions around the solar system. They surrounded Earth completely. There was no escape. Their weapons were powered and ready, but they did not fire. Yuna watched the tactical display with growing confusion. The alien ships just sat there, waiting, silent. "What are they doing?" Commander Okonkwo whispered. Before anyone could answer, a new transmission arrived. Lieutenant Kim's eyes went wide as she read it. "Admiral, we are receiving a direct message from the Villani flagship. The Villani are the oldest species in the Concord. They have existed for over 9 million years." She paused, her voice uncertain. "They are requesting a single human emissary to come aboard their ship." "A trap," Okonkwo said immediately. "They want to capture one of us." "Perhaps," Yuna said slowly. "But they could destroy us right now if they wanted to. Why ask for a meeting?" She read the full message on her screen. One line caught her attention. The Villani ambassador had made a specific request about what kind of human should come. "Send someone who asks questions," the message said. "Send someone who wants to understand." Yuna thought about this for a long moment. The aliens had not attacked. They had asked for someone who asks questions. This was not how enemies behaved. She made a decision. "Get me Dr. Marcus Webb." Marcus Webb was not a soldier. He was 53 years old, slightly overweight, and had never held a weapon in his life. He was a xenolinguist, a scientist who studied alien languages. He had spent the last 15 years learning how different species communicated. He understood not just their words, but the way they thought. When he arrived on the bridge, he looked nervous but curious. That was good. Curious was exactly what they needed. "Dr. Webb," Yuna said, "the Villani have asked for a human emissary. Someone who asks questions. I am sending you." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Me? Admiral, I am not a diplomat. I am not trained for negotiations." They did not ask for a diplomat. They asked for someone who wants to understand. That is you. She handed him a datapad with all the information they had. Find out why they are doing this. Find out what they really want. Marcus looked at the datapad, then at the tactical display showing 10,000 enemy ships. He swallowed hard. What if they kill me? Then we will know they want war. But I do not think they do. Something else is happening here, Dr. Webb. Something we do not understand yet. Marcus nodded slowly. He was scared, but beneath the fear, Una could see something else in his eyes. Curiosity. The need to know. That was why she had chosen him. An hour later, Marcus sat alone in a small shuttle, flying across the void between Earth's fleet and the massive Villani flagship. The alien vessel was enormous, shaped like a crystal flower with 1,000 petals. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. As he flew, Marcus studied the original declaration of war again. Something about it bothered him. He had read thousands of alien documents in his career, and this one felt wrong somehow. The grammar was strange. The structure of certain sentences did not match what he knew about Galactic Standard Language. He ran the text through his translation software again and again, trying to understand. Then he saw it. The declaration used a very old grammatical form, one that had not been common for thousands of years. In modern usage, it would mean declare war against. But in the ancient form, the same structure could mean something very different. It could mean declare war for. Marcus felt his mind racing. The Concord had not voted to destroy humanity. They had voted for humanity. But for what purpose? What did that even mean? His shuttle entered the docking bay of the Villani flagship. The doors closed behind him. There was no going back now. As he stepped out of his shuttle, he was greeted by a being unlike anything he had ever seen. The Villani ambassador was tall and thin, with a body that seemed to be made of living crystal. Cracks ran through his form, showing his incredible age. Light moved inside him like slow lightning. "I am Corveth," the being said. His voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I have waited a very long time to meet your kind." Marcus tried to keep his voice steady. "Why have you declared war on us? We have done nothing wrong." Corveth's crystalline face shifted in what might have been amusement. "You are already asking questions. Good. That is exactly why we chose you." "Chose us for what?" Corveth turned and began walking down a long corridor. Marcus followed, his heart pounding. "Your species asks a question that no other has asked in 9 million years," Corveth said. "When faced with impossible odds, when surrounded by enemies you cannot defeat, your first response was not to surrender. It was not to attack. It was to ask why." He stopped at a massive door and turned to face Marcus. "That question, Dr. Webb, is more valuable than you can possibly imagine. And the answer will change everything you think you know about the galaxy." The door opened, revealing a chamber filled with light. Marcus stepped forward into the unknown, carrying with him the hopes of all humanity. He did not know it yet, but he was about to discover that the galaxy was not what it seemed, and humanity's greatest war would not be fought with weapons. It would be fought with hope. Marcus stepped through the doorway and found himself in a library. But this was not like any library he had ever seen. The room stretched upward for what seemed like forever. Floating platforms held millions of objects, books, crystals, strange machines, and things he could not even identify. Soft light came from everywhere, and nowhere at once. Ambassador Corveth walked ahead of him, his crystal body catching the light and throwing tiny rainbows across the walls. He moved slowly, like someone who had long ago stopped hurrying. "This place is called the Archive of Ended Things," Corveth said. "Here we keep the memories of those who are gone." Marcus looked around in wonder. "Gone? You mean dead species?" "Yes." Corveth stopped beside a pedestal that held a small, glowing sphere. "This sphere contains everything we know about the Vistrani. They were among the first to achieve space travel. They built wonders that we still cannot understand. They lasted for 6 million years. What happened to them?" Corveth was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something that sounded like grief. "They simply stopped. One day, they decided they had done enough. They had seen enough. They chose to end." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "They killed themselves? An entire species?" "Not violently. They just stopped having children. Stopped building. Stopped dreaming. Within a few generations, they were gone." Corveth gestured at the endless shelves around them. "There are 23,000 species recorded in this archive. Every one of them ended the same way." Marcus tried to understand what he was hearing. 23,000 species, millions of years of history, all gone. Not from war, not from disease, From giving up? I do not understand, he said. How can an entire species just decide to stop existing? Corvith turned to face him. The cracks in his crystal body seemed deeper now, darker. Let me tell you about the journey every species takes. It is always the same. First, they struggle. They fight against nature, against each other, against death itself. This struggle makes them strong. It gives them purpose. He began walking again, and Marcus followed. They passed platforms holding the remains of civilizations Marcus could not even imagine. Then they discover technology, Corvith continued. They cure disease. They end hunger. They stop aging. They create perfect comfort. No more struggle. No more pain. No more death. That sounds wonderful, Marcus said. Does it? Corvith stopped and looked at him with ancient eyes. When there is nothing left to fight for, what is left to live for? When every problem is solved, what gives meaning to existence? Marcus opened his mouth to answer, but no words came. He had never thought about it that way before. Species after species discovered the same terrible truth, Corvith said. Perfection is poison. Comfort is death moving slowly. When beings have nothing left to overcome, they lose the will to continue. He led Marcus to a viewing window. Outside, the stars burned bright and cold. Somewhere out there was Earth, surrounded by 10,000 ships. The Galactic Concord was formed 9 million years ago, Corvith said. It was meant to bring peace and prosperity to all species, and it succeeded. Too well. We eliminated war. We shared technology. We made life easy and comfortable for everyone. And then, we began to die. One species at a time. The young stopped dreaming. The old stopped caring. Birth rates fell across the galaxy. Wars ended not because beings learned to love each other, but because no one cared enough to fight anymore. Corvith turned to face Marcus. His body seemed to flicker slightly, and Marcus realized the ancient being was struggling just to stay alive. The Villani were among the first species in the galaxy. We have existed for 9 million years. Do you know how long it has been since a Villani child was born? He did not wait for an answer. 6,000 years. My species chose comfort over continuation. We are not unique. We are simply the oldest of the dying. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. It was horror, but also something like pity. He was looking at the representative of a galaxy that was slowly, willingly, fading away. Why are you telling me this? Marcus asked. What does this have to do with humanity? Corvith made a sound that might have been a laugh. It was sad and beautiful at the same time. Because you are different. Because when we looked at humanity, we saw something we had forgotten could exist. He touched a control, and a holographic display appeared between them. It showed Earth's history. Marcus watched in fast forward as humans struggled through ice ages, built civilizations, destroyed them, and built again. He saw wars and plagues and disasters. He saw humans crying, dying, suffering, and then he saw them getting back up. Every time. Without fail. Your species has done terrible things to each other, Corvith said. You have created weapons capable of destroying your own world. You have poisoned your planet. You have committed cruelties that shocked even the most violent species in our Concord. Marcus felt shame heating his face. We are not perfect. We know that. Perfect? Corvith's voice rose with something like wonder. Perfection is what killed us. Your imperfection is what makes you magnificent. Look at your history. Every tragedy made you angrier. Every setback made you more determined. You do not accept defeat. You do not accept death. You fight against the dying of the light with a fury that we cannot understand. The display showed humanity reaching for the stars. It showed the first moon landing, the first Mars colony, the first faster-than-light journey. Despite everything they had done wrong, humans kept pushing forward. You survived ice ages through sheer stubbornness, Corvith said. You created beauty in the middle of battlefields. You wrote love songs during plagues. You reached for the stars while still arguing about whose god was real. You are completely, magnificently insane. Marcus did not know whether to be offended or proud. We just do not know how to give up. Exactly. Corvith moved closer to him. That is exactly what we lost. The Concord spent millions of years trying to find the secret to eternal peace. We achieved it. And it is killing us. Then, you appeared, a species that was barely out of its cradle, still covered in mud and blood, still fighting among yourselves, and yet you had something we had forgotten existed. What? Hope. Not the soft hope of comfort and safety. The hard hope, the defiant hope that says, tomorrow will be better because I will make it better. The hope that survives when everything else is lost. Corveth's crystal form began to glow brighter. Marcus realized the ancient being was putting all of his remaining energy into this moment. The declaration of war was a test, Dr. Webb. We needed to see what you would do when faced with impossible odds. Would you surrender? Would you give up? Would you prove that you were just like every other species that eventually breaks? Marcus thought about Admiral Chen and her tiny fleet, standing firm against 10,000 ships. He thought about the crew joking on the radio, sharing music, refusing to show fear. We did not give up, he said quietly. No, you did not. Your admirals formed a defensive line that they knew was useless. Your civilians began broadcasting entertainment into space. We intercepted what you call memes. Your species was facing extinction, and you were making jokes about it. That is just how we deal with bad situations. Corveth placed a crystal hand on Marcus's shoulder. It was cold but somehow comforting. That, Dr. Webb, is exactly why we chose you. Not to destroy you. The vote was never about destruction. It was about salvation, yours and ours. Marcus looked into Corveth's ancient eyes. What do you want from us? We want you to teach us how to live again. We want you to remind us what we forgot. We want you to infect us with your beautiful madness. Corveth's voice grew soft. We are offering you everything we have built over 9 million years. Every piece of technology, every discovery, every secret. In exchange, we ask only one thing. What? Save us from ourselves. Remind the galaxy what it means to truly exist. Be the cure for a disease we did not know we had. Marcus stood in silence for a long moment. The weight of what he was hearing pressed down on him like a physical force. Humanity, the youngest species in the galaxy, was being asked to save the oldest. It was impossible. It was insane. It was exactly the kind of challenge humans could never resist. I need to talk to my people, Marcus said finally. Corveth nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Dr. Webb? Yes? Hurry. We have been dying for a very long time. We do not know how much time we have left. Marcus turned and began the long walk back to his shuttle. His mind was spinning with everything he had learned. The galaxy was not their enemy. The galaxy was a patient, waiting for a doctor who did not yet know the cure. But as he walked, Marcus felt something unexpected growing in his chest. It was fear, yes, but beneath the fear was something stronger. It was hope. The hard kind, the defiant kind, the human kind. Marcus returned to the human fleet with his mind full of impossible things. His shuttle landed in the docking bay of Admiral Chen's flagship, and he walked to the bridge in silence. The crew watched him pass. They had questions in their eyes, but they did not speak. They could see that he was carrying something heavy. Admiral Yuna Chen was waiting for him. Commander Okonkwo stood beside her, arms crossed. Lieutenant Kim sat at her station, fingers frozen above her console. The entire bridge was silent, waiting. Marcus stood before them and tried to find the right words. How could he explain what he had learned? How could he make them understand that everything they thought they knew about the galaxy was wrong? He started at the beginning. He told them about the archive of ended things. He told them about the 23,000 dead species. He told them about the Villani, who had not seen a child born in 6,000 years. He told them about the terrible disease of comfort that was slowly killing every species in the Concord. When he finished, the bridge was even more silent than before. Admiral Chen stared at him with an expression he could not read. Let me make sure I understand, she said slowly. The galaxy declared war on us because they want us to save them? Yes, Admiral. They surrounded Earth with 10,000 warships to see if we would give up. Yes, Admiral. And because we did not give up, they want to give us all their technology and knowledge, and ask us to teach them how to live again. Marcus nodded. That is correct. Commander Okonkwo let out a breath that was almost a laugh. This is insane. Yes, Marcus agreed. Ambassador Corveth said the same thing about us. Admiral Chen walked to the viewing window and looked out at the alien fleets. 10,000 ships hung in space like a crown of stars around Earth. They had enough firepower to destroy the entire solar system, and they were asking humanity for help. The declaration of war, she said quietly. You said the translation was strange. I examined it more closely during my return trip, Marcus said. He pulled out his datapad and showed her his analysis. The Concord used an ancient grammatical form. In modern usage, it reads as a declaration of war against us, but in the original meaning, it says something different. It says they are declaring themselves for us. They were announcing their support. Support for what? That is the question I asked Ambassador Corveth. He explained that the declaration had 3 parts, 3 provisions that were voted on in secret. Marcus brought up the information on the main display. The bridge crew leaned forward to read. Provision 1. Declare war on humanity to test their response. The Concord needed to know if humans would break under impossible pressure, or if they would stand firm. Lieutenant Kim spoke up. That is cruel. They scared billions of people just to see how we would react. They have been dying for millions of years, Marcus said. They felt they had no choice. They needed to be sure. What is the second provision? Admiral Chen asked. Provision 2. If humanity chooses to fight despite certain defeat, they are worthy of receiving the inheritance. Marcus paused to let the word sink in. The inheritance is everything the Concord has ever created. All their technology, all their science, all their art and culture and history. 9 million years of progress from thousands of species. The bridge crew exchanged looks of disbelief. The offer was too large to imagine. Humanity had spent 32 years slowly developing space travel. The Concord was offering them a leap of millions of years in a single moment. And the third provision? Admiral Chen's voice was barely above a whisper. Provision 3. If humanity accepts the inheritance, they will be given a task. Marcus looked at each person on the bridge in turn. They want us to reignite the will to live across the entire galaxy. They want us to cure them of their contentment. They want us to remind them what it means to struggle, to dream, to hope. Silence filled the bridge again. Outside the window, the alien ships waited in perfect stillness. Commander Okonkwo was the first to speak. They want us to save a galaxy that has been dying for millions of years. We have barely figured out how to keep our own species alive. How are we supposed to do this? I do not know, Marcus admitted. But Ambassador Corveth said something that stuck with me. He said that we are beautifully and magnificently insane. He said our insanity might be the only medicine left. Admiral Chen turned away from the window. Her eyes were bright with something that might have been fear or excitement, or both. They chose us because we do not know when to quit. They chose us because we are too stubborn to lie down and die. Yes, they chose us because we are human. Marcus nodded. That is exactly what they said. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. Commander Okonkwo, open a channel to all ships in our fleet. I want every crew member to hear this. Okonkwo hesitated. Admiral, should we not discuss this privately first? This is a decision that affects all of humanity. That is exactly why everyone needs to hear it. We are humans. We make decisions together, even the impossible ones. The channel opened. Admiral Chen's voice carried across the fleet, reaching every person on every ship. She told them what Marcus had learned. She explained the 3 provisions. She described the dying galaxy and the desperate hope that the Concord had placed in humanity. When she finished, she asked a simple question. What do we do? The responses came quickly. From captains and lieutenants, from engineers and medical officers, from the cooks in the kitchens and the mechanics in the engine rooms. Everyone had an opinion. Some were scared. They pointed out that humanity was too young, too small, too inexperienced for such a massive responsibility. They said the Concord should find someone else. Others were excited. They saw the greatest opportunity in human history. Unlimited technology, unlimited knowledge, the chance to become something greater than they ever imagined. But most of the responses shared a common theme. They were not focused on what humanity would receive. They were focused on what humanity would do. A young ensign on one of the destroyers put it best. They are asking for help. That is all that matters. We help. That is what humans do. Admiral Chen listened to all the voices. When the discussion faded, she called for a vote. Every person in the fleet could vote. Every voice would count. The result was overwhelming. Humanity would accept the Concord's offer, but they would do it on their own terms. Admiral Chen drafted a response. She let Marcus and her senior officers review it. They made changes, argued about wording, and rewrote entire sections. It took hours. The alien fleets waited patiently. Finally, the message was ready. Admiral Chen transmitted it herself. To the Galactic Concord and all its member species. We have heard your request. We understand the weight of what you are asking. We accept. She paused, and when she continued, her voice was stronger. But we will not become caretakers of a hospice. We will not watch you fade away and write about you in history books. If you want our help, you will have to accept what we truly are. We are not gentle. We are not patient. We are not comfortable. We are loud and messy, and we make mistakes. We fight and argue, and sometimes we break things. But we also fix what we break. We fall down and we get back up. We face the impossible and we laugh, because what else can you do? So here is our answer to the galaxy. If your species wants to die, that is your choice. We will not stop you. But if any of you have forgotten why existence matters, come to Earth. Come see how we live. We will remind you. Fair warning. It will not be comfortable. The message ended. The fleet waited. Aboard the Villani flagship, Ambassador Corvith received the transmission. He read it 3 times. The cracks in his crystal body seemed to glow brighter. He made a sound that his attendants had never heard before. He was laughing. They did not just accept, he said to the empty room. They challenged us. They told us to come and learn from them. His laughter grew louder, filling the ancient ship with a sound it had not heard in millennia. They are exactly as insane as we hoped. He began preparing a response. But he already knew what it would say. The galaxy was about to change, and humanity would be the ones holding the hammer. The first alien visitors arrived on Earth 3 weeks after Admiral Chen's message. They came not in warships, but in small personal vessels. They came not as conquerors, but as students. They came because they had heard humanity's challenge, and something deep inside them had stirred for the first time in ages. The Villani came first. 12 of them, including Ambassador Corvith himself. They were the oldest beings most humans would ever meet. Their crystal bodies moved slowly, carefully, as if they might shatter at any moment. They looked around at Earth with eyes that had seen stars being born and dying. Your world is so loud, Corvith said to Dr. Marcus Webb, who had been assigned as their guide. So much movement, so much chaos. Marcus smiled. You should see it on a busy day. The Villani had requested to see human art. Not the carefully preserved masterpieces in museums, but the art that ordinary humans made. So Marcus took them to a community center in a small town where children were painting. The children were making a mess. Paint was everywhere. On the paper, on the tables, on themselves. They laughed and argued about colors. Some of their paintings were beautiful. Some were terrible. None of them seemed to care which was which. A young girl, no more than 7 years old, walked up to Corvith. She looked at his crystal form with wide eyes. You are very shiny, she said. Corvith bent down to her level. Thank you. You are very colorful. The girl looked at her paint-covered hands and giggled. I am making a picture of my dog. He died last year. I miss him, so I paint him to remember. Corvith was quiet for a long moment. You create art to remember pain? I create art because it makes me feel better, the girl said simply. Then she went back to her painting. Marcus watched Corvith closely. The ancient ambassador stared at the girl for a long time. Something was happening inside him. Something was changing. We stopped making art millions of years ago, Corvith said quietly. We had perfect recordings of everything. Perfect preservation. We did not need to create. We had nothing left to express. Maybe that was the problem, Marcus said. Corvith nodded slowly. Maybe it was. More visitors came as the weeks passed. The Kreth arrived next. They were warriors, or they had been once. Their species had abandoned physical bodies long ago, choosing to exist as pure energy within mechanical shells. They had thought this made them stronger. They had not felt anything in centuries. A Kreth commander named Vortash requested something unusual. He wanted to experience human combat training. Not the weapons, not the tactics. He wanted to understand why humans fought. Admiral Chen assigned him to a basic training camp. Vortash watched young recruits struggle through obstacle courses, fail, and try again. He watched them push their bodies past exhaustion. He watched them help each other when someone fell. This is inefficient, Vortash observed. With proper technology, Physical weakness could be eliminated. There would be no need for this struggle. A drill sergeant, a woman named Rodriguez with arms like tree trunks, overheard him. She laughed. The struggle is the point, metal man. I do not understand. Rodriguez pointed at a young recruit who had just fallen face first into the mud. As they watched, 2 other recruits ran back to help him up. See that? That kid has failed 5 times today. Tomorrow he will fail less. Next week, he will help someone else who is struggling. That is how we build soldiers. Not by making them perfect, by making them push through imperfection. Vortash watched the recruits continue their training. Something stirred inside his mechanical shell. A memory from long ago. Before his species had abandoned flesh, he remembered what it felt like to strain, to struggle, to overcome. I wish to try, he said. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. You want to run the obstacle course? In that metal body? Yes, she shrugged. Your funeral. Vortash failed spectacularly. His mechanical body was not designed for climbing walls or crawling through mud. He fell. He got stuck. At one point, 3 recruits had to work together to pull him out of a ditch. But he finished. And when he crossed the finish line, covered in mud that would take days to clean from his joints, he felt something he had not felt in 500 years. He felt alive. The most unusual visitors were the Morveth. They were not a species in the normal sense. They were a collective, a hive mind of 11 billion souls, sharing a single consciousness. They had not known individuality for 2 million years. Every thought was shared. Every experience was collective. They sent a delegation to Earth with a strange request. They wanted to experience loneliness. The human psychologists were concerned. How do you give loneliness to a being that has never been alone? They debated and argued and eventually came up with a plan. A single Morveth body was disconnected from the collective. For the first time in its existence, it was alone. No shared thoughts, no collective wisdom. Just one mind, isolated and afraid. The experience lasted 7 days. During that time, the single Morveth struggled to function. It did not know how to make decisions alone. It did not know how to handle its own emotions. It cried. It raged. It sat in silence for hours, terrified by the emptiness inside its own head. On the 7th day, the Morveth was reconnected to the collective. The 11 billion minds absorbed its experience. They felt its loneliness, its fear, its struggle, and they felt something else too. They felt the moment when the single Morveth had looked at a sunset and appreciated it entirely on its own. They felt the moment when it had made a decision without asking for permission. They felt the strange, terrifying, wonderful sensation of being a single self. When the delegation returned to their homeworld, something unprecedented happened. Individual Morveth began requesting temporary disconnection, not for punishment or exile, but for growth. The collective that had not changed in 2 million years began to evolve, but perhaps the most unexpected transformation came from a species called the Taven. They were known throughout the galaxy as the greatest cooks. They had spent millions of years perfecting their cuisine until every meal was mathematically perfect in nutrition, texture, and flavor. A single Taven chef came to Earth to study human cooking. Her name was Selith, and she had cooked for emperors and councils. She expected to find primitive techniques and crude ingredients. Instead, she found tacos. This is wrong, she said, examining a taco from a street vendor in Mexico City. The nutritional balance is inefficient. The temperature is uneven. The structural integrity is compromised. The vendor, an old man named Eduardo, shrugged. But is it good? Selith took a bite. Grease dripped down her chin. The shell cracked and spilled, filling everywhere. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely nothing like the food she had spent her life creating. She ate 4 more. I do not understand, she said, wiping her face with a napkin. It is not perfect. Why do I want more? Eduardo smiled the smile of someone who had won arguments without trying. Perfect is boring. Perfect does not make you feel anything. This, he gestured at the chaos of his food stand. This makes you feel alive. Selith stayed on Earth for 6 months. She learned to make dishes that were imperfect, messy, and absolutely wonderful. When she returned to her homeworld, she opened a restaurant that served flawed food. The lines wrapped around the block. Across the galaxy, species that had been slowly fading began to stir. The inheritance was being transferred to humanity, piece by piece. But something more important was being transferred in the other direction. Humanity was not giving the galaxy technology or knowledge. They were giving something far more valuable. They were giving them a reason to try again. Marcus Webb traveled constantly during this time, meeting with species who wanted to understand humans better. He gave the same message everywhere he went. We are not special because we are strong or smart or advanced. We are special because we refuse to give up. When things are bad, we make jokes. When things are impossible, we try anyway. When we fail, we learn and try again. He would pause and look at his audience, beings from worlds he could never have imagined. You forgot how to do that. But you can learn again. We will teach you. It will not be comfortable. It will not be easy. But it will be worth it. And slowly, one species at a time, the galaxy began to believe him. 50 years had passed since the day 10,000 ships surrounded Earth. 50 years since humanity learned the truth about the dying galaxy. 50 years since they accepted the impossible task of teaching ancient species how to live again. The great chamber of the Galactic Concord was full for the first time in living memory. Not with holographic projections or digital representatives, but with actual beings who had traveled across the stars to be present. Species that had not left their homeworlds in millennia had built new ships just to attend. The chamber hummed with voices, arguments, laughter, and the sounds of 1,000 different languages. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Corvith. He was ancient beyond measure, older than some stars. His crystal body was covered with cracks and repairs. Human medical technology had kept him alive far longer than should have been possible. He had refused to die. There was too much left to see. He waited for the chamber to quiet. When it did not, he smiled. 50 years ago, silence would have fallen immediately. Now, the delegates were too busy talking to each other. Please, he said, his voice amplified to fill the room. I have something to say, and I am old enough that I may not have another chance. The laughter that followed was genuine and warm. Slowly, the chamber settled into something like quiet. 50 years ago, we held a secret vote about humanity. We declared war to test them. We offered them everything we had in exchange for their help. Corvith paused and looked around the room. I believe it is time to assess the results of that decision. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing data that made many delegates gasp. In the past 50 years, 847 species have reported their first natural births in over 1,000 years. 12 species that had voted to pursue collective extinction have reversed their decisions. They have chosen to live. The chamber buzzed with reaction. Corvith raised a hand for quiet. Art production across the galaxy has increased by 4,000%. New music, new stories, new ideas are spreading faster than at any point in recorded history. And most remarkably, he paused, letting the moment build. 31 new species have achieved space travel and joined the Concord. This is the highest number in 4 million years. The display showed images of these new species, young civilizations taking their first steps into the stars. Some of them looked strange. Some of them looked almost human. All of them looked excited to be alive. Humanity did not bring peace to the galaxy. Corvith continued. They brought something far more valuable. They brought purpose. They reminded us that existence is not a problem to be solved, but an experience to be lived. He turned to face the human delegation. Admiral Yuna Chen sat at the front, now 87 years old. Her hair was white, and her face was lined with age, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. She had refused every offer of life extension technology. She said she wanted to show the galaxy that death was not something to fear. Beside her sat Dr. Marcus Webb, the man who had first learned the truth. He had spent the past 50 years traveling the galaxy, teaching and learning in equal measure. He had written 12 books about his experiences. He had helped dozens of species rediscover joy. And next to him sat a young woman named Elena Chen, the Admiral's great-granddaughter. She was the new face of humanity's galactic mission, young, bold, and absolutely certain that the universe was worth fighting for. The matter before us today is simple, Corvith said. We must vote on humanity's place in the Concord. Specifically, we must decide whether to grant them permanent leadership of our governing body. A murmur ran through the chamber. Leadership of the Concord was the highest honor any species could receive. It had not been offered in 3 million years. The vote was called. One by one, species registered their decision. The counting took hours. When it was done, Corvith read the results. The vote is not unanimous. The chamber erupted in confused noise. In all of recorded history, major Concord votes had always been unanimous. Disagreement was seen as a failure of the system. 3 species have abstained, Corveth continued. They wish to debate the matter further. They have questions and concerns. They want to argue. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was filled with something like wonder. This is the first non-unanimous vote in 4 million years. Admiral Chen rose from her seat. Despite her age, her voice carried across the chamber without amplification. We taught them that. The chamber fell silent, uncertain how to respond. Was this a failure? An insult? Chen smiled. Before humanity arrived, you all agreed on everything because none of you cared enough to disagree. A unanimous vote meant nothing because there was no passion behind it. No belief worth fighting for. She looked around at the thousands of delegates. These 3 species that abstained? They care enough to argue. They care enough to have an opinion. That is a victory, not a defeat. The delegate from one of the abstaining species stood up. She was a Taven, the same species that had fallen in love with tacos 50 years ago. I do not disagree with giving humanity a position of honor. I simply believe we should discuss it first. I want to hear arguments. I want to understand different perspectives. She paused, searching for the word. I want to think for myself. A wave of realization spread through the chamber. This was what humanity had taught them. Not agreement, but engagement. Not peace, but passion. The willingness to care enough to fight. Corveth bowed his head toward the human delegation. We offer you leadership of the Concord. What is your answer? Admiral Chen looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at Elena. A silent conversation passed between them. Elena stood up. She was young, barely 30, but she spoke with the confidence of someone who had grown up knowing exactly who she was and what she believed. We decline. The chamber exploded with confused noise. Corveth raised a hand for silence, but it took a long time for the delegates to quiet. You decline? He asked. Why? Because thrones are comfortable, Elena said. And we do not do comfortable. She stepped forward, addressing not just Corveth, but the entire chamber. You offered us power because you thought we could save you. But that is not how it works. We cannot save you. We can only remind you that you are worth saving. The rest is up to you. She looked around the room at beings from thousands of worlds. Warriors and artists. Scientists and dreamers. Ancient species and young ones. All of them watching her with something that had been rare in the galaxy for millions of years. Curiosity. Our proposal is this. Dissolve the Concord. Replace it with something new. Something messier. Something that requires every species to fight for their place at the table. Something that will never be comfortable or peaceful or perfect. What would you call such a system? Corveth asked. Elena smiled. We call it democracy. It is inefficient. It is chaotic. It is infuriating. And it is the best system we have ever found for making beings care about their own future. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the Taven delegate who had abstained began to make a sound. It was laughter. Other species joined in. The sound grew until it filled the entire chamber. It was the sound of a galaxy remembering how to feel. The vote to dissolve the Concord and create a new democratic federation passed. It was not unanimous. It would never be unanimous again. And that was exactly the point. Corveth found Admiral Chen after the session ended. His crystal body moved slowly now, weaker than it had ever been. But his eyes were bright. I am grateful I lived to see this day, he said. Thank you for teaching us. Chen shook her head. We did not teach you anything. We just reminded you what you forgot. And what was that? She looked out at the chamber, still filled with delegates talking and arguing and laughing. That it is not about avoiding death. It is about choosing what you live for. Corveth nodded slowly. The galaxy declared war on humanity, expecting you to break or transcend. Instead, you did something far more dangerous. You made us human. Chen smiled. You are welcome. She walked away to join her granddaughter, leaving Corveth alone with his thoughts. He looked at the chaos of the chamber, the beautiful mess of a galaxy learning to live again. Humanity had not conquered the stars. They had done something far more difficult. They had given the stars a reason to shine.